Hello, FedPhoenix fam. So today I'm going to do a video of something that's been weighing on my mind a bit, and I'm going to call it the prison experience, right? Because if you've been to prison, or even if you haven't, and if you've spoken to a lot of people who have been to prison, you will find that there are many parallels in each individual experience, right? From medical negligence, to personal growth. A lot of people, while they're incarcerated, use some or all of their time to better themselves. Some people do. I personally did a lot of introspect and self analysis and kind of redirecting various thought processes that have not been beneficial to me in life. Some people get in really good shape. Some people, get a college degree through, and of course you're paying for all this out of your pocket, by the way, as far as a college degree goes, but through correspondence mail. Um, you know, so there are a lot of parallels that exist between persons that have been incarcerated as far as their actual prison experience, both good and bad usually. But then there are also a lot of very night and day extreme differences, right? To the extent of you may talk to two people who did, the same amount of prison time in the same prison, and they have vastly different experiences to the extreme that you may wonder, is one of them exaggerating? Are they both exaggerating? Because it doesn't really jive. But I'm going to explain that, and how you can't compare your prison time to another person's. So when I was incarcerated, we'll take the example of one person who I would just refer to in this video, for the sake of this video, as Princess. Princess came from generational wealth. Princess was very comfortable financially. Her husband, very successful, very financially comfortable. She was in their white collar, nonviolent, and she had a relatively short sentence. I think she had like a year or 9 month sentence. And during her entire sentence, she was very financially comfortable. Her family was very supportive, kept in regular contact. I think she may actually, yeah, she had some in-person visits from her family, and of course, people always answered the phone for her. If she wrote, they wrote back, lots of video visits. Um, and it was really, she was able to kind of live mentally outside the prison more than inside during her time because, her outside life was so supportive and thriving during her incarceration. And she was a person with no significant medical or psychiatric issues as well. So then you have somebody, then there was another person, and I'll call her the Instagram model, because I think she actually was. But, also aesthetically pleasing. And if you're a woman, you certainly are aware that, when you go through phases of, slimmer to chunkier to, letting yourself go to keeping yourself up, the world definitely treats you different based on your appearance. And the more aesthetically, the more visually pleasing you are, often the better people treat you in general, which of course creates opportunities and makes some things much easier for you. So anyway, so the second person, the Instagram model, I'll never forget. I was on the phone one day talking, I think to my friend, and she was on one of the phones next to me. So I was, whether I wanted to or not, I was hearing her conversation, and she was hysterical. She was crying and crying and crying and yelling at apparently her child's father. She had got a court order before she went to prison that she would maintain access to her child while she was incarcerated. But of course, the other parent had custody. And the other parent was essentially telling her, I don't give a crap about the court order. You're not going to talk to your kid because I don't like you, because we've had bad, we have baggage, and, this is part of your punishment, from me to you. And she's crying and angry and begging to talk to her child, and how dare you. And then this person also, in spite of the fact that in the free world before prison, they were a person who I'm sure could have lined up hundreds, maybe thousands of randoms who would have said, oh, girl, I'll ride out of prison bed with you. Ooh, you're so fine. Give me your inmate number. Let me put something on your books. But the reality was, when she was incarcerated, people left her for dead. She was in there struggling financially. Um, she was not getting mail. I don't think had people to video visit. She certainly got no in-person visits. Um, so her time, right? Instagram model and Princess, even though I think they served the same exact amount of time, Princess's situation wasn't that bad. In fact, a lot of her focus was it was almost like an entertaining thing for her to be in prison. This is like an interesting, zesty thing that she can talk about now, when she leaves at dinner parties. It's such a unique experience. Whereas the other person was literally living in their own hell. They were afraid of what their child was being told, that maybe they don't love them or they've abandoned them. They They were fearful that because people weren't answering their calls or writing them back, that when they came home, they would have no support, that they would be someone who doesn't have the option of home confinement, even if that's made an option by the Bureau of Prisons, because they have no home to go to. This is a person who is losing everything and has lost everything, whereas Princess has lost literally nothing but some freedom. You know what I mean? And then you have situations where, you know, if you have medical issues, your prison time can be greatly exasperated as far as the difficulty and the unpleasantness because of that. So if you have a person who's in relatively good health, then they're really not going to have in their prison story anything, negative, health wise to say, other than maybe, the food was kind of crappy and the food you could buy off commissary was mostly sugar and carbs and, they gained some weight or it was hard not to gain weight. But then if you have someone like myself, for example, who in the free world relies upon, spinal and knee injections to maintain mobility, with chronic pain, now I didn't have them for 16 months. So when I went into prison, I could walk up and down the hill with little problem, when I left prison, I could barely walk across the yard, and anytime, asleep, awake, whatever, I was in constant physical pain. Um, so if you're a person with good health and maybe you did the same amount of time as I did, my situation, my story, my prison story is going to be very different than yours, in that regard. And then there were people who I was incarcerated with that while they were incarcerated, sometimes out of the blue, sometimes, things that kind of started slipping a little bit and it may have been foreseeable. But there were people who lost their mothers while they were incarcerated. You don't get to go to the funeral. If you're lucky, someone sends in a DVD of the funeral. And then if you get really lucky, you can go over to the chapel and actually watch the DVD. But this doesn't always play out the way it should. And what if the DVD players aren't working? Because that happens a lot. You don't get to say goodbye most of the time. So this is just a part of your life that's been just ripped in half and you can do nothing and you don't have the comfort of friends and family. You're just in this crap hole of misery, dealing with this, and thankfully I didn't have to deal with that. That was certainly a fear of mine when I was incarcerated. You have people that, in the free world get psychiatric care, and perhaps they're on certain medications that aren't on the BOP formulary. And maybe the ones on the formulary don't work for them. So in the free world, maybe you have, some type of schizophrenia, and in the free world, you take medication, you're able to live a relatively normal life. You're not very symptomatic or not symptomatic at all. And you have a therapist to help you process, or a psychiatrist to help you process, the day-to-day life, and so you're okay. You're functioning. People aren't even aware that you have these issues. And then you get to prison, you can't get your meds, and you don't even have, relatively decent therapy or psychiatric services. And even if you're just in there for 3 months or 6 months, you may come home completely out of your head, completely. And mind you, that's why you're also getting hit with all the post-incarceration syndrome stuff, all the reentry stuff, all the stress, all the madness, and trying to rebuild your life and rebuild relationships. And while you don't even know if what people are saying is really what they're saying, or if you're understanding it correctly, and the voices in your head are saying that the maybe the one or two people that are actually trying to support you are plotting against you and trying to harm you, and that's your reality. Whereas a person with no pre-existing mental illness and doesn't get any significant mental illness while incarcerated comes home, and if you compare those two stories, you get very different ideas of prison. My prison experience was not pleasant. In fact, it came with a lot of crap and BS and difficulty, and that's putting it mildly. I've met people who did the same amount of time that I did in a different camp, at a different time, and they were like, the loss of freedom was inconvenient. There were a lot of inconveniences, but overall it wasn't bad. Got sober, I'm doing great. Learned to play guitar. Did some leather work. That was kind of my hustle. I sent purses and stuff and belts home. My people sold them and kept my books nice. And heck, when I came out, I had a little money in my pocket to get a good, jump on getting my life together. So I say all that to say that whether a person is doing 6 months, 6 years, or 60 years, you cannot, as a former inmate, chalk up, another person's experience based upon your own, because you have different experiences. And when you're in prison, if you have any level of empathy, then you certainly are aware that the people around you are many are having very different experiences, from extremes to, mostly somewhere in between. Some people in prison find out they have cancer. Some people don't make it out alive. Those who find out they have a terminal illness, file for compassionate release, and more often than not, don't get granted. Um, and so they have to go through treatment while incarcerated. Maybe they don't get their treatment because they're incarcerated, don't get it regularly. There's so much, there's so many levels and aspects to a person's incarceration experience that you really cannot think, because you've been incarcerated, because you know someone who has, that now you're in a position to have much of an opinion about the incarceration experience of others. And so with that, it's just a little food for thought, and I'll call it probably the prison experience. If you have not subscribed and you're willing to, please do. Really trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers. I think we're a little over 200. My Cash App and PayPal will be in the description if you would like to donate to the channel. As will my email if you need to contact me for any reason. And as y'all know, I'm working on my book, and I will keep you updated when that comes out. So whatever you're going through, it is a slice of your life. You will get through it because you have to. And good day. God bless.